Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jackson Chabot. I'm the Director of Public Space Advocacy at Open Plans. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 1999, advocating for safe and livable streets. We are here today, this afternoon, a beautiful afternoon it is, on 31st Avenue in Astoria, Queens. We're joined today by some wonderful guests, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So first, the Borough President.
The Borough President of Queens, 718, baby.
You heard it here.
John Surico, one of the lead organizers of the 31st Ave Open Street.
Hi, I'm Evie, Hantzopoulos, co-founder and one of the organizers for the Open Street.
Amazing. So we've got about 5 questions here. We're going to have a super roundtable conversation, so jump in at any particular question. But we're going to start with you, Borough President. When we think about public space and we think about open streets, how do you see your role in this conversation as well as in the literal creation of public space?
Well, the leader of the borough, all 2.4 million residents who reside in this borough, my job is to advocate, and I see my role as not only being on the open street and enjoying it and talking to my constituents, but also being in the halls of government advocating for open streets, just as we have done for 31st Avenue, for 34th Avenue, and I anticipate we will see this movement continue to grow across the borough. And my job is to also navigate the thorny conversations around maybe some concerns neighbors have, if they are valid concerns. But, you know, we do have a lot of NIMBYism in Queens as well, so I have to point that out as well. But our job is to bring people to the table, to talk about the benefits, to also address if there are some quality of life issues that can be addressed. That's the job I see as Borough President, and making sure more open streets happen.
That's amazing, and so I know, looking at the geographic distribution across the borough is huge, spatially, and thinking about what that looks like in different spaces. How do you think that we can continue to get open streets and more public space in different spaces? And then we'll jump to the two of you.
Well, first of all, you know, residents should know that if they are interested in open streets, they should contact our office. And there is a particular application process that has to go through the Department of Transportation. And we've seen sort of this growing movement happening where people saw what was happening down on 34th, what was happening on 31st. And even in Southeast Queens, where I come from, people were like, we want open streets as well. So we now have an open street coming up into Adelaide Park, which is going to be a phenomenal program. So really thinking about this from an equity standpoint as well. We know that many parts of Queens are under-resourced when it comes to parks, space, and open space. And certainly communities understood that and found that out during the pandemic when we were all cooped up in the house trying to figure out how to get our 6-year-olds out moving and helping them to get some fresh air. So I think people have rediscovered their neighborhoods. They've rediscovered their neighbors, quite frankly, coming out of this pandemic. And instead of just passing by one another, you now are talking to each other and acknowledging each other's existence, something we don't always do in New York City. But here in Queens, I'm happy to say that we are leading the nation and leading this city in the conversation around reimagining what open space looks like.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of this process is reimagining the open space. So I'm going to turn to the two of you here on the local level. How do you see your process in reimagining this public space and part of the neighborhood?
When we've done surveys of the open street and asked people what word comes to mind, we hear front yard and backyard a lot. This is the front yard and backyard, that people act like this is, you know, a place where they can go and see neighbors. I mean, I think it's worth saying that, you know, me and Evie didn't know each other 2 or 3 years ago, right? And I didn't know any of the volunteers in the group, and we've all lived in the same neighborhood. We just didn't know each other. Now we talk to each other on a regular basis. When I walk around Astoria, I know people, which was really nice. It's a really nice sense of local connectedness that I think is an important part of this being a true public space.
For sure, you mentioned 2.4 million people, is that correct? In the borough, and for me, public space makes it hyper-local, it makes it human in that sense. And so I'm curious from your perspective, both as an organizer as well as in your day job, how you see public space for the borough and as well as for the local aspect.
I mean, public space is critical. You just kind of look around here, people being able to socialize, enjoy, bring what they want to the space, and I think that that's really, really important. There's a lack of open space. There's a lack of open public space, I should say, particularly in this area of Astoria, which is why, you know, we kind of started the open street at the height of the pandemic. And I think it's, you know, it's really, really important because, you know, as John said, you're not just, you know, meeting people for the first time, you are forming bonds. And so there's a real community, I think, that is formed both in terms of organizing the open street, both in terms of people who come here, people meet, people get to do all sorts of things, and it's what you make it. And so I think part of our process is to really figure out how to make it as inclusive and allow people to bring what they want, to the space. So it could be trivia, it could be a vendor fair, it could be mutual aid. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen. And that's why I think public space is so important, because it's open, it's democratic.
I appreciate that. And obviously, before the conversation here, we had someone come up and ask you a specific question about housing. And this provides an easy opportunity for them to interact with you and interact with government in that way. And I think fundamentally the democratic nature of our existence. So we've got a lot of great public spaces. There's still a lot of opportunity for public spaces. What would you say for your vision for public space in the borough? What are the opportunities that you see?
Well, there's limitless opportunities for open space in the borough. And I'll say, let me start with parks as well, because I've invested $20 million into parks in my first 19 months in office, because they are, as Evie said, democratic spaces as well. No matter what your socioeconomic status is, no matter what zip code you come from, no matter what your document, whether you're undocumented or not, open space in parks are open to everyone. So there are limitless opportunities here. We're thinking about this largely from also an equity standpoint, right? Near public housing developments, immigrant communities who historically have been under-resourced. How are we creating these open spaces and looking at this from an equity framework as well to make sure that every corner of the borough has open street access? And it's really about opportunity. Like I said, in access, everybody should have access to an open street. Everybody should have access to parks.
Right.
We're building out and using the leverage of our office to also navigate government in a way that helps us to expand park space as well.
Right.
Why aren't we using developments sometimes that are coming up and using the leverage of our land use bully pulpit to open up more open space as well, to build new parks? So we're leveraging everything we can in our office to ensure that happens. Just this Thursday, we were down at Socrates Park as well in Astoria, which we put, I think, a little bit north of close to $1 million into that project to ensure that they now can have 24 hours, 7 days a week, a building there as well, so that children can have access from the developments up there as well year round. So real keen opportunity now to make sure that open space, and like I said, this is a movement. Everybody's talking about this. Everybody saw those documentaries about what was happening on 34th Avenue where you can do Tai Chi. I even was up on, I think I was dancing, hopscotching up there. And you sort of think about Queens and how Queens is continuing to grow. We're seeing a lot of development. But with that development happening, there has not always been this sense of belonging for communities because they're not actually having open space as they come up. So this is a real opportunity with open streets to redefine what our streets look like and to give it back to the people.
Amen. I couldn't agree more. On the sort of neighborhood scale, John, I wonder if you want to comment on opportunity from the Western Queens Public Realm agenda.
Yeah, and we have some signatories here at the table.
Exactly.
So we neighbors have put together this public realm agenda, which is really an idea of what we want to see in District 22 in Western Queens for the next 10 years. That includes open streets, access to the waterfront, which has been blocked for so long in Astoria. That is, clean curbs, this new pilot that's, more kind of innovative ways of thinking about new public space, converting slip streets into plazas, things like that. So far we have 11 signatories, I think, on last count, all local groups. And it's really a document to say, hey, we care about this and we want to invest in these spaces.
For sure. Do you want to comment on that as well?
There's so many opportunities, and so I think it's really, especially coming out of the pandemic, really trying to utilize those spaces that are there, right? So just trying to get the resources and trying to get the ability to kind of turn those spaces into truly public spaces, not kind of privately run, publicly accessible, but like truly public spaces, and I think that's what it's really all about.
For sure, and this is great. I appreciate the nature of the direction of the conversation. We're talking about accessibility, we're talking about equity, and that's certainly been never more true during the pandemic, as you highlighted as well, Borough President. So I'm curious if you want to comment on and have a conversation here about what are the biggest hurdles in that sense towards getting equitable public space in the borough, in Astoria.
I would say political will, and I think, I've been proud to work with this administration on many things, the mayor's administration, but often you will have loud voices that have consistently been around for 100 years in communities Sometimes they're the loudest ones and able to sort of make the city reassess whether something is going to move forward. So I view my position as a counterweight to that. Of course, wanting to hear if there are valid concerns to issues, but we need to have a city of elected officials, and I'm proud of the elected officials for the most part in Queens, who all have been very supportive for the most part of open streets. But we need to make sure that political will is there and to continue to advocate and push the Department of Transportation to do more of these everywhere. And if it's a question of capital investment, like I could put some investment in. So, sometimes we run into brick walls because there are excuses, right. But there's really no excuse on why we should not have more open streets in Queens, especially coming out of the pandemic where we said we don't simply want to build back and go back to normal because normal didn't work for these communities, right? We need to go to a new normal and build back better, and open streets are a big part of that.
I completely agree.
I would just say there have to be resources put into communities that maybe don't have the capacity to do volunteer-run open streets like this one here. And so I think, looking forward, you want things to be equitable. But there are communities that are struggling, and so it's like, I can't handle running an open street. I'm juggling all this kind of stuff. So I think making sure that there's resources and support for communities who do want an open street, but maybe just can't amass like a team of volunteers to do stuff because there's so many obstacles already, that they're facing. So I think that that's really, really key because we don't want to just see it, we want it everywhere. We really do.
Yeah, it's a great point. And from the resources perspective, I know John and I have talked a lot about management of public space, and the volunteers here are managers of this public space in addition to the Hort. And shout out to the Hort we met Rico this afternoon, and he's both working on 34th Avenue as well as here, coming by to take care of the beautiful planters. And it takes people, it takes capacity, and like you said, capital at a certain perspective. We got a question for you on capital as well. But with that in mind, John, you want to talk about management of public space and kind of what that goes into for you all on the street?
I mean, an open street can't just be where there's a bid and when there's a volunteer group that has time in a middle class or upper class neighborhood. It's that you're never going to have an equitable program if you rely on those two things, right? But at the end of the day, the volunteers know the community the best, and I think that's really important. We handle the local conversations. We all live here. We know the kind of programming that's needed, or we can kind of have those conversations. But the city taking any responsibilities off of that plate, so we can handle just that will make for a much better public space, I think.
For sure. And as you pointed out, part of your role is advocating. It sounds like being a liaison as well. I appreciate that you've mentioned some of the loud and potentially detracting voices from the conversation. What would you say to business owners that might not like open streets yet? Or neighbors that might not like open streets yet?
Get with the times. I meant, one, it should be beneficial to your business. I mean, connecting with the community is how you get people to come into your store to utilize your business, right? So I think that I don't see why a business wouldn't want to interact with its customers, right? And so I think there's a real opportunity to connect with people in a way that you wouldn't connect necessarily with, with the hustle and bustle of communities like Astoria or different communities across the city where people just come in, slap 50 cents down, grab a coffee, well, probably $1 now, and then run out the store. So I think there's a real opportunity there. And of course, we value public input. So it's not that I'm saying we need to bypass, community boards, being in the conversation as well. There is a process that does need to play out so we can address some concerns if there are. But for the most part, I would say it's a no-brainer.
I agree. On the local level, I'm curious, how have you all navigated and managed potential tension?
Oh, well, we've definitely had, some pushback. There's been so much support, I want to say overwhelmingly. People have been very, very supportive. But, there are people who are concerned about parking spaces. There are people who were concerned. We were doing this 7 days a week from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, the very first year of the pandemic, moving the barricades ourselves. And so we decided, okay, people were like, it's too much. And we were like, actually, we think it's too much too. So, we adapted. We took feedback and shortened it and focused on quality as opposed to just, quantity in terms of the amount of hours that we were going to do. So, we always tried to listen. I think good communication is key. It's hard because sometimes people are running their business, or we have our jobs and we're trying to figure it out. But I think we've tried to be proactive in reaching out to the businesses, and then also when they have complaints, we try and work with them and try and achieve mutual understanding. So we're doing a whole restaurant month, as a way to encourage people to come and visit the restaurants here on the 31st Ave Open Street. So we're trying to problem solve together. There's always going to be some people who don't like it, but I think overwhelmingly we have the community support. And we're always looking to improve it too. It's not perfect, it's going to evolve and it's going to get better every year that we do it.
That's great. I appreciate the solutions-oriented approach, and I think that speaks to the nature of your success already.
I would say to handling tensions. So I would say it's part of managing a public space. It's the public sphere, right? There's going to be different voices in the room. But I think their success is our success, right? And it's getting across that, if your business is doing well, the open street does well. And we want to help you get there because we are customers in your business, right? I love going to these restaurants, love going to all these places. It's figuring out every single day different ways we can partner and thinking, last year, I think we did less engagement. This year we're doing a ton of engagement, like the restaurant weekend, as Evie mentioned. But there's always room for improvement. I think one example is that we were doing a lot of live music last year. And a couple of neighbors were like, hey, we love the open street, but there's a lot of music. And we're like, loud music. And we're like, listen, it's a lot for us as volunteers to be doing this every weekend too. So we limit it to one time a month. We have live music. And that it's better for us too because we handle different programming. We don't just have performances. So again, we're always learning. So every public space is a work in progress, right? So I would say that's the main thing.
Totally. So going back to the capital question, maybe the toughest one of the afternoon here. We look at this, and this is great, but this is still very much a street. And it's the nature of the Open Streets program asks car owners and asks vehicle owners to move their vehicles. We see in the frame here that that's certainly not necessarily the case. How do we get to a point where we don't have to deal with those questions and potentially we can move towards something like a plaza if it's what the community wants in this space?
Well, we've even been talking about a linear park in Jackson Heights, which I'm all in on. And once again, it is also about, like I said, and I think they've reiterated it, making sure that we're listening to valid concerns and trying to address those concerns. So I appreciate the art of compromise is politics. We can't compromise everything, but the art of compromise is key on many of these initiatives. And I would say, more buy-in from the city agencies, but once again, not losing the essence of what the program was designed to do, and that was for communities to run the open streets, right? So I think it's a juggling act, right? Because we don't want to lose what people intended these open streets to be: democratic streets run by the people of communities. I think there is a role for community-based organizations to play here, and I believe the Department of Transportation should come up with funding. So as we talk about capital, and this is something I've said to the administration as well, why couldn't we find community-based organizations who can also help facilitate these, perhaps their organizations in this community? And then at the end of the day, you're able to hire people from these communities. So you're investing in human capital. It's a job opportunity for people in the local communities. And I think that can be one way of, it's nothing like a neighbor talking to you. I'm not saying I want NYPD in here, ticketing everybody and towing everybody out, because there needs to be a conversation had. But that, I believe, can only be achieved if you have community-based organizations coming together to keep the open streets as organic as possible.
Yeah, I think the organic nature of the open streets speaks to that potential. We talk about resources and management as well, and making sure that volunteers, as John pointed out, can do the fun stuff, but are not necessarily having the tough interpersonal conversations and getting to a point where we have that from the management perspective of the street. So curious here from a lightning round perspective, favorite public space? Doesn't have to be borough limited, but I know you probably will have a borough specific one. So we'll start with John here. I can see the smirk on his face. He's got a few ideas.
All week. I have to say my favorite public space, I have to say something in Queens. I'm going to say Astoria Park. I love Astoria Park. It's a mid-sized park, not as big as Central or Prospect, but I think it's such a beautiful park. I love the two bridges that go over it. I love the neighborhood environment that it creates. It's really nice.
Okay.
I'm in Flushing Corona Meadows Park. How could you go wrong with that park? It's just beautiful. One of the things I remember coming up very early in my childhood is, and I was born to teenage parents. They didn't have a lot of money, But that place, and I recently dug up some pictures and saw some pictures of us when we were kids in there. We were able to bring a blanket and slap down a sandwich, cheese sandwich with some mayo on it, with some wheat bread, with some chips, and just enjoy time with the family. So I just have those memories of that park coming up, and how much access, even for a family like mine who didn't have much, how that park offered us that opportunity.
I feel like I have to say the Queens Botanical Garden.
Better.
Where it's my day job, which I love. But I also, I love Astoria Park also. But one of the reasons why we started the open street here is because it's a mile away. And so, figuring out how we get more spaces everywhere, I think is the goal, Yep. But yeah, Queens Botanical Garden. Yours too,
the Botanical
right?
Garden. I love it.
John wants to do an honorable mention.
I was just thinking about it. Generationally, Alley Pond Park has served my family really well. I had birthday parties growing up. My birthday party at the Nature Center there, which is amazing. And now my dad plays pickleball there. So it's a very important park for my family. And it's a gem of Eastern Queens. Highly recommend going if you have.
I got to do one of those. So Brookville Park, because that's in my neighborhood, and it is really a great park. It's so serene there. I often walk there, even as borough president, fielding constituent complaints and issues in the park, and investing in the park too. But it's really a special park where I get to connect with my neighbors on many levels.
All right, gotta go around.
Okay. Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge.
Okay.
I mean, it's just amazing. Take that train and, it's amazing. So, yeah.
As a Brooklynite, I will refrain from the conversation.
Rockaway Beach.
Get this. We did celebrate John's birthday at Rockaway this summer, so we had that. It's a great public space. Okay, favorite block party memory?
Ooh, coming up. Oh, you really want those memories? Oh, okay. I would say, St. Albans, Murdoch Avenue. I lived at one point in my life 2 blocks from LL Cool J.
Okay.
So he used to pull up on our block, but just some great memories of taking the girls jump ropes, and they couldn't even do that without the guys hassling them, and just good memories of people yelling at us playing basketball up until midnight. So Murdoch Avenue, we had some great my parties there.
Amazing.
So I grew up in Flow Park, Belrose, so half the town's in Queens, half the town's in Nassau. And there was my friend's block party every single year on the Belrose side, and the block party would end at 10 p.m., but the party in his backyard would end at 3 in the morning. And I love that.
I guess my best memory is, growing up in Peabody, Massachusetts, and my Uncle Pete lighting off bottle rockets 4th of July. And all the kids just loving it.
I'm sure he was everyone's favorite.
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay, last lightning round question. Favorite famous person you've interacted with or ran into in public space?
Oh, shoot.
Okay, so get this. I saw Spike Lee in Fort Greene yesterday. So.
Where were you in Fort Greene?
Baba Cool.
Okay.
On Lafayette. So this is the stumper.
On an open street?
No, just in public space, out and about.
Out and about.
Unexpected, though. Surprise, perhaps.
I have one. Washington Square Park. If you sit there for more than 10 minutes, you're bound to see someone famous. Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Abraham Lincoln, so he's gigantic, so he stood out.
Touche.
Carol Burnett.
Okay.
But it was in Los Angeles on the sidewalk. That was a big one. It wasn't really like a park or anything like that, but.
Sidewalks are public space.
Yes, true.
I would just say, like I said, LL Cool J coming up, he was always in the neighborhood. I would say him.
Amazing. All right, final words?
We love being out in the open street. We can hope to continue to make it more and more permanent each year with more additions, and we're really excited for the conclusion of this season, take some hibernation, some rest, and then come back even stronger next year.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
Borough President?
Queens get the money. Queens is the future. Open Streets is here. It's the present. It's the future. We're leading the way. Queens is going to be the model for where we need to go as a city. It is the model for where we need to go as a city. So I know the other boroughs will imitate, but they can never emulate what we do here.
You heard it here first. Today, we'll call that a wrap on 31st Avenue in Astoria, Queens. Want to thank all of our participants here, and we'll call it there. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.